Thank you for joining Invasive Action Week Lunchtime Talks. This is our second session this week, and today's topic is participatory science, employing investigations into invasive shothole borers. First of all, I'm Julie Clark, and I'm with University of California Cooperative Extension. I'd like to introduce our two speakers for today. The first speaker is Dr. Beatrice Noboa Berman. She's a University of California Cooperative Extension advisor for Orange and Los Angeles counties, and her specialty is urban forestry. Her research background is insect-plant interactions. She received her PhD in insect ecology and her bachelor's of science in biology from the University of Buenos Aires in Argentina. Beatrice's research and extension program is focused on finding appropriate management strategies for urban forest pests that affect Southern California trees, such as the invasive shothole borer beetles and gold-spotted oak borer. Our second speaker is Hannah Vasilis. She is the statewide invasive shothole borers survey and trapping coordinator with University of California Integrated Pest Management Program. As a coordinator for this program, Hannah offers her technical expertise on how to effectively monitor trees for the invasive shothole borers and for a variety of audiences. She has been working in the fields of urban forestry and emerging tree pests with the University of California since 2016. Please welcome our first speaker, Dr. Beatrice Noboa Berman.
All right, let's get started. So today I want to present about a project that we developed to basically assess how good participatory science can be as a tool for monitoring for invasive species. And just to get us started and have everyone on the same page, I want to go over again, what is it that we consider an invasive species? There's many different terms. And so it is really important to have like a good sense of what are we talking about when we talk about invasive species. And there's basically three things that we have to check in order to consider something an invasive species. It has to be a species that is non-native to a specific geographic area. That doesn't mean that it could be native to that country, but not to that region, right? It could be from a different state and still it's not native to that location where you're looking at. And the way it arrives to that location where it's non-native to, it has to be through human action, right? Could be intentional, could be unintentional, but the movement of this species has to be associated with human activities. And third, and also super important, is that this species has to cause some kind of environmental or economic harm or harm to humans. And invasive species in general are really causing a lot of damage in the United States. Annually, the United States spends $160 billion to damage and control costs related to invasive species. In California, we estimated that invasive species costed about and a little bit more than $6 billion per year because of all the damage and whatever it takes to try at least to control some of them. And that's why we don't want to get to the point where we need to, deal with this damage. And so the important thing, the super important thing, is early detection of this pest. So the earlier we found out that there is an invasive pest, the easier it is to manage it. right? We cannot try to eradicate or control something if we don't know that it's there and where it is located. The earlier you manage or start your eradication efforts, the more probable it is that you'll be able to be successful, and also the less cost you're going to have to incur to get that managed. And for this early detection action, we have different sources where we can get, notifications that a certain species, a new species has been observed. So we have government agencies that, periodically do sweeps in either in the borders of the state or the country, or where goods just come in from overseas. We have our local extension specialists or researchers, and we're working always looking into different locations that are very sensitive to invasive species, and we tend to find those species because we're actually looking for them. Also, people that work in farms, nursery operators, all of that work commercially with a setting where invasive species tend to be involved. You're moving plants, there could be invasive insects in those plants, or even invasive plants within a nursery, and also the members of the public. And of all this, the general public makes a really great contribution. There's a lot of people out there that are very aware of the local fauna and flora, and are able to spot quickly anything that is new. And actually, between 27 and 60% of the new pests that are detected in the United States are initially detected by members of the general public. Examples are the Asian longhorn beetle. This guy here has been first detected and reported in 1996 by a Brooklyn resident that was observing some damage in his trees, and so he reported it. And on the right, we have the Asian giant hornet. Was also discovered by a citizen in their front porch, and that person reported it, and then we learned that we had this new species that was invasive and we need to deal with. So all this sort of process of data gathering can be something circumstantial, like you see something weird and then you report it, but it can also be more formalized as participatory science projects. So participatory science is also known as citizen science or community science or crowdsourcing. And it is when members of the general public are participating in at least some or most of the stages of a scientific project. And these projects can be driven by scientists or a collaboration with multiple stakeholder groups within a community. And, the general public works usually in the process of monitoring, sometimes even in decision-making or basic research as part of this project. And it has a lot of potential benefits. It allows the scientists and the community to collaborate together, and that collaboration improves the understanding of science and the scientific method by the public. Also, we know that if the training is adequate, we can get really good quality data from the volunteers. And having volunteers allows greater data collection, right? We can gather data from more locations than just a team of 1 or 2 researchers. And then we have extra benefits, which is anybody who participates in any level of this kind of projects have more awareness and more knowledge of the issue, and can share that information with their community, with their neighbors, with their family. And doing something, especially in the case of participatory science related to invasive species, makes you feel empowered, makes you feel like you're taking some action to deal with a problem. It does have some limitations though. In general, it kind of depends on the species that is your target of this, this scientific project, and the characteristic of the species, how probable is that it will be reported and how accurate the ID is. So species that are very conspicuous, like the Colorado potato beetle up here, they are very easy to be reported, right? There's 98% chance that it will be reported, will be seen and reported. But other species, like the Russian wheat aphid, it's like tiny, it's not very, you know, conspicuous. It doesn't have anything that it just makes it flashy. It has very low probability of being reported. The other thing that also applies to this example is how similar are they to other native species, right? So this potato beetle looks very different, very striking. This little wheat aphid looks like any other aphid, right? It says you need a lot more training or a lot more careful observation to distinguish it from something that is not a problem. And so the chances of that being reported or being actually accurately reported are way lower. And the other limitation has to do with how easy this invasive species are to see, right? And that is a problem when you cannot see the invasive species directly and you end up relying on signs and symptoms of infestation. That makes it a lot harder to have an accurate ID. And that is the case of the invasive shothole borers. So to give you a little bit of a background on this invasive species, this is a beetle native to Southeast Asia. It's teeny tiny, as you can see. The females are bigger than the male, and those are the ones that fly. The males are flightless and stay always inside the tree. And the females stay most of their life inside the tree, but at some point they disperse trying to find new hosts. They're still so small, they're about the size of a sesame seed. So really inconspicuous, very similar to species that are native. There's a lot of this kind of ambrosia beetles, this family of beetles, or this group of beetles that are native. And the main thing is that they attack the trees and live most of their lives inside the trees. So we don't usually see the beetles. We see the signs and symptoms in the tree. And most of the symptoms that we end up seeing are the symptoms caused by the pathogenic fungus that they bring with them. So the main problem with invasive shothole borers is that these beetles use a fungus as source of food, and they grow this fungus in galleries like this one inside the tree. And that fungus causes a disease that is called Fusarium dieback, and the tree ends up dying because of that disease, right? That disease basically clogged the vascular system of the tree, and the trees cannot move water and nutrients, and so it ends up dying. And it has devastating effects in natural and urban areas. This is an example of the Tijuana River Valley, where all of this were willows that got attacked by invasive shothole borers and Fusarium dieback and died in a matter of a few months. And it is quite prevalent here in Southern California, right? This is what the galleries inside a branch look like. All these galleries from the beetles are filled with the fungus that then colonizes the wood and kills the tree. And if that's not all, these beetles and fungus are not very selective. They really like a lot of different species of tree. We call them reproductive hosts, are the species that can sustain the beetle's life cycle, and the beetle can grow the fungus inside of them. So here in California, there's 65 species that are qualified as reproductive hosts, but actually the number of potential hosts worldwide is around 400. So in different parts of the world, they attack different species, whatever is available. Here in California, this is a short list of the most susceptible species. And, you know, as you can see, it includes your willows, your sycamores in London plane. Some of the oaks are quite susceptible, the cottonwoods, a lot of the riparian species tend to be the most sensitive. And, you know, about 2/3 of the very susceptible hosts are native to California. So it's really quite a threat to our native forests, especially our riparian forests. So because this is a big problem here, we've been together with a lot of other agencies, including California Department of Food and Agriculture. There's been several programs for systematically trapping and surveying as much as we can of Southern California. This map is the current state of the results of that. This is where in red where the beetles have been found, and in blue where we have some kind of trap or a specific program that monitors that location and the beetle hasn't been found yet. As you can see, these beetles are all over Southern California, basically from San Diego to Santa Barbara. And the problem, as I was saying, is that we mostly, when we're doing surveys on the trees, we rely on the signs and symptoms of an infestation, right? The main symptom is this exit hole where the beetle enters, basically is the entrance of that gallery that they dig inside the tree. And then there's staining, there's gumming, there's some frass accumulation. But except for this entry hole, which has to be a particular size, these other symptoms that are like companion symptoms and signs, they are not specific, right? Many different pests and different pathogens or diseases can cause staining or gumming in a tree. And even a lot of pests make round entry holes. And so only Shothole borer does this particular size and shape of entry hole. So it's a little bit challenging to accurately identify invasive Shothole borer infestations. And so to go over the challenges that we have for this, we have that it has a wide host range. So it's not like we're going to be looking only at a certain kind of tree. We're going to have to be looking at probably something around the 70% of the trees in an area to cover all the species that could be affected by Shothole borer. The beetles spend most of their life inside the tree, so it's very unlikely that you will see the beetles unless we have specific traps for it. The infestation symptoms can be confused easily with other pests and diseases. And because it takes them a few years to actually start getting some effects on the tree, so it takes about 3-4 years for the beetles and the fungus to actually kill the tree or start showing like extensive dieback. So really, if you're not looking for it, you usually won't notice that something is wrong until you start noticing that the tree is dying, and that's after several years of infestation. That makes managing and monitoring this pest a lot harder. So with all of these challenges, we were wondering if we can still use participatory science as a tool for monitoring Shothole borer. Like, is this something we can do it, or is this something too challenging for a volunteer to overcome all of this, rocks on the trail? So we launched the Invasive Shothole borer monitor training. This is a project that was a collaboration between the University of California Cooperative Extension and the California Naturalist program, which is another program within UCANR. And we wanted to know how accurate would this volunteer-based data be to identify Shothole infestation, and can we, tweak the training modality to make it more accurate? How can we make it better? So for this project, what we did is we first created a data collection tool. Then we trained the volunteers. We got the volunteers to submit the reports of the infestation. And then we went and evaluated the data accuracy. So I'm going to show you how we did this. The data collection tool we use is iNaturalist, which is it's an app that you can download for free in your phone, and you can access that on a browser as well. And within that app, we created a little project where volunteers could collect different data from a tree that they suspected was infested, like infestation level, the species of the host, and a bunch of other information related to the tree, the symptoms, and what they observed. We asked them to collect pictures whenever they did an observation, pictures of the entry holes, pictures of the trunk with the damage, pictures of the leaves or something that will help us identify the species of tree, and then a picture of the tree with some kind of landmark. And this was very important for us because this app will take a GPS point wherever you're doing your observation. And then with the GPS point and this nice picture, we were able to relocate that tree again. And that will be important in a minute. So when we trained the volunteers, we did it two ways. During 2020, if you remember, that was the middle of the COVID pandemic. So we only were meeting over Zoom. So we did a training that included an online course that is free and accessible for everyone, 2 Zoom trainings sessions, and then we had an office hour that was optional. For 2021, we were able to meet our volunteers in person, so we switched one of those Zoom trainings for an in-person field session. And during that in-person field session was pretty important. We got people to see the infestation next to us. We were able to show them how we assess a tree directly. We were able to bring samples, and they were able to look at the samples, look at very close at the galleries, at the entry holes, and have a good feel of what that infestation symptoms look like. And then we did data evaluation. The first part, we did some kind of quality control for the observation, making sure the observations were complete and evaluating the pictures to see if they were likely Shothole infestation or not. And then part 2 was actually using the GPS location and that picture to find that tree again and reassessing the tree. So our team within UCCE went back, looked at almost all of the trees that were submitted and reevaluated them. We got lots of submissions. Between the two, the online and in-person trainings, we were able to train 34 participants. We had 121 reports. Not all of those reports we were able to reassess. Some of them, either we could not locate the tree or were inaccessible or any other problem, but 102 of those trees were reassessed. And what we found is that when we compare what the volunteers decided it was Shothole versus what the experts decided it was Shothole, is that the ID accuracy was really high. So for the online only, we had 83% accuracy. And for the online and in person, that accuracy actually grew to 96%. And to give you an idea, 96% accuracy on identifying an invasive species or a pest in a tree by their symptoms is about how good it gets with a professional that works in tree care. So really, volunteers were able to show that they are very good at doing this, especially when we have the in-person component. The ideas that were incorrect, they usually we were able to flag them just with the pictures. We already suspected that that wasn't Shothole bird. A lot of them were pruning cuts that were bleeding, or entry holes that were caused by other look-alike beetles or pests. And then the other data that they were collecting, like level of infestation and trunk diameter and height and all that, they were in general pretty good, within the same range as the experts, except for the infestation level. About half of them were pretty accurate with the infestation level, but in general, volunteers tend to overestimate infestation levels, which is not a big deal. And it kind of makes sense, like when you see trees with a lot of staining, it's scary, and you would consider this more severely infested than what we will consider it. And so it's not a problem, because once the volunteers had assigned something as infested, then we can take an action and send someone to go look at that tree and decide if the tree was severely infested or not. In general, though, it's good that no one was considering something that was severely infested that actually needs attention as something lightly infested. So underestimation of infestation level was very low, so that's good. So we're not going to be missing something that we actually need to go and take a look. So what have we learned? Well, we learned that in-person training is important, right? We get way better accuracy. And also, I think being there and being able to look at the trees with someone that is training you just will probably give you more confidence in, okay, I'm going to be reporting this because I've seen it and someone pointed it out to me, so I know exactly what I'm looking for. We know that all the incorrect ideas were actually flagged first through the pictures. So that let us know that actually the quality control can be done based on pictures in the future. And yeah, we had some challenges. They were mostly related to technology. So not all of the volunteers had experience collecting data with an app in their phones, and that took some challenges and troubleshooting with some of them. And iNaturalist sometimes can be a little bit buggy, especially when you're trying to do a project like this that has some specific fields. And so, we had to navigate this challenges that technology is bringing us, but really when we wait, how much we can get from using something that is free for us to use and can give us a geographic location of that observation, and that also that data can be accessed by anyone else and is easily shareable. So we can actually share this information with municipalities, agencies, anybody who might have any kind of power to manage that infestation that the volunteers found. That is very, very valuable. So we really think that we can overcome those challenges because of all of the benefits that we get from using this kind of system. And then something that is like an extra is that all the volunteers gain knowledge of the invasive species in general, in Shothole in particular. And a lot of the volunteers were part of the Master Gardener program. And many of them are now participating in the programs that we have about emerging tree pests in LA County and in Orange County. So, this monitors project had some extra, consequences that actually are helping us in the fight against invasive species that are not necessarily directly related to people finding shothole borer infestations and reporting them, but just sharing information, sharing that with your community, and even just getting involved as part of one of these Master Gardeners programs. So in big conclusion, yes, this kind of data collected by volunteers is very reliable in the case of shothole borer infestations. And this kind of project could be really useful. It can help us monitor in areas where the leading edge of the infestation. We can try to find if the infestation is advancing or not. It will be really useful to have this program in areas that are close to infested areas, but maybe not necessarily infested yet, and having people well trained and aware, and having people report as soon as they find something. Those are areas where early detection is the most important, but also knowing that our volunteers can accurately report infestations even within the areas that we know are already infested can really help us making management decisions. Like we know that we have several reports from this area. There must be some sort of hotspot in there, and we need to contact whoever is managing that location and take action. So anyways, we did learn that this is a really, really good option for us in the fight against invasive shothole borers. So now I'm gonna leave you with Hannah, who's gonna talk about our next steps within this program.
Hi guys, and good afternoon. Going on to our next steps. Obviously, we would like to train even more volunteers and doing the in-person training, because that we have the evidence that does increase the accuracy, and because we can know that most of the inaccurate data points will be easily flagged in pictures, we can do quality control basically just from the submitted reports. And that helps us gather more data so that somebody physically doesn't have to go out to each tree to verify that the data is correct. If we know based off of the pictures provided, we can say, oh, that's definitely shothole borer or not. And then we also get to add our observations to the online map. And the online map is the one that Bea talked about earlier, and I am the one that gets to add all the data to the map. And this database includes data from different natural resource agencies, the county agricultural commissioners' offices that had done trapping and monitoring. So it is great to be able to add public data, to this public service that we have. And next slide. Thank you. With that, we did another participatory science training in March of 2023. This was an online and in-person training. We did basically the same format. The only thing we omitted was the office hours. We didn't include that. And then we also, as I mentioned, we did the quality checks based off of the data and the submitted photos provided. And so as I mentioned, the inaccuracies are fairly easily submitted or eliminated through pictures. With some of these photos are where there is a different pest on top of maybe shothole borer, but for example, the middle photo. And then the two outer photos were cork oak species, and with that, it's not as straightforward as some other thinner bark species. You have to dig through a lot more park to be able to expose that entry hole that Bea was talking about. But with these photos, it was pretty clear to eliminate these easily. Next slide. And our results were that we had 88% accuracy. I was able to add 35 observations to our distribution map. And we had a lot of participation online. We had 56 folks come on, and similar to today, we had people from all over the world. And of course, it's great to be able to have such a wide reach. I wish that we could afford to fly anyone that wanted to come to the in-person trainings to be available, but we did 2 locations, Orange County and Los Angeles County, and those we had 21 in Orange County and 13 in LA County, which was a pretty good turnout as well. Next slide. And going forward with this latest class wrapped up and all the results analyzed, I was able to digest all of this information into a newsletter so that we can send it out to all the volunteers, including the folks that maybe weren't able to make it to the in-person trainings, just to keep everyone in the loop. At some point, they were interested enough to sign up and take an online training, even if they, for whatever reason, weren't able to make it to the in-person trainings, or if they did make it and they weren't able to submit data. I hope they still have the interest to be able to learn what happened with this data, and we were able to highlight some of our volunteers that had a lot of activity, and then also other volunteers that had very good data submissions. So they had all the pictures provided that we asked for, and just to have this newsletter as an opportunity to advertise new trainings, and to let them know, please keep submitting to the iNaturalist project if you're a fully trained volunteer. Over time, we will be doing quality checks, probably at regular intervals or at different times after our most recent in-person trainings. And with that, we can go to the next slide and I can share with you our upcoming events. I'm going to be doing another online training on July 7th, and then the next 2 weekends after that, so the weekend of July 8th and the weekend of July 14th, we'll be doing in-person trainings at Ventura, Santa Barbara, San Diego, and then the Inland Empire. And for the Inland Empire, I just lumped Riverside and San Bernardino counties together. And so if any of you out there are interested or in any of these localities and would like to make it, you can contact me for more information. And then Randall also shared the link that has the website where all of these dates will be posted, as well as registration information. And I would say check back probably at the end of this week for everything to be, for the registration link to be posted. And then there's my contact information. And with that, that is the end of my spiel. And obviously a big thanks to everyone, all the volunteers and everyone else. And with that, we can do Q&A.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Bea. Before we start, we have a few questions in the Q&A. For those of you who have some, please enter them there and we'll address as many and hopefully all of them, time permitting. And before we start with them, I'd like to give a deep thanks to Randall Oliver, who's on this call. He's the statewide communications coordinator for the invasive shothole borer's program, and he's with UC Integrated Pest Management. He's arranged the speakers and coordinated them and all the technical matters that have made this week this week of daily presentations possible. So thank you, Randall. And let's start with our first question. It's from Lawrence. Why does the USA have such few working field scientists that we must rely on citizens volunteering as scientists?
Hannah did comment on that in the Q&A itself, but yeah, funding is generally the short answer on that. But Bea or Hannah, if you want to add anything to that, please go ahead.
Funding is one of the main problems, and it's not like, oh, we don't have researchers working on these issues, right? It's more about an opportunity to get more information, more data. We have many scientists, but we also have many invasive species, and we have tons of problems. And really, even if you have, how big is a research group, in a lab? So let's say you can hire some students, you can hire some people, then you can have a big team of, like, let's be generous, you have a team of 10 people, not very common. You have a team of 10 people going on and looking at this kind of things. It's that versus having a team of 70 people going on looking at things that are really well trained. So it's really expanding where you can reach. It doesn't replace the role of the scientist, right? You still need someone to come up with the plan, come up with something that makes sense, that is scientifically accurate. But then for the workforce, it is, it allows you to get a lot more data in way less time. So it's more about using an opportunity, knowing that we have public that is interested in these issues and want to take action, and taking that as an opportunity to do some good work.
And I'll add to that, what Bea just said is that it also, the more average citizens that are educated and knowledgeable about issues, the more it helps inform us, the science, and the general public. So it's mutually beneficial.
Yeah, I would like to make one more comment related to this. It's like, is that actually, thanks to, in the case of invasive shothole borers, what we had starting in 2020 or the end of 2019, we had finally really good funding from the California state to devote to this particular problem. And so it sometimes takes time to get the adequate funding, but sometimes you do get it. And in this case, we did. And that's why we had so many things going on related to invasive shothole borers. It's a big problem, but it really needs a big response. So it's just wanted to point out, it's not a few researchers working on this, it's many agencies. I noticed someone was asking about the ag commissioners, the agricultural commissioners' role. They had a huge role in all the monitoring programs that happen statewide. So the agricultural commissioner's offices took the role of placing traps and doing visual observations and looking for infestations all over the state. So it's really not just the scientists, it's a community of stakeholders and agencies that work collaboratively, and we wanted to include the public in this group because we know that they're interested and they can have very valuable contributions.
We have a number of questions related to management of shothole borer. We also have a number of questions relating more specifically to the training So why don't we focus first on the training, and then we can finish up by approaching some of those questions regarding management. So one question on training is, was there training on both insect ID and tree ID, or just damage-based collection?
So it was mostly visual assessment of the trees. So there was a bit of tree ID work, and pointing out when we did the in-person trainings or even the online trainings, having the materials provided of like, these are the common hosts and these are identification materials to help you if you're in the field and you see a tree and you can identify it based off of the materials we provided. And then there is a little bit of insect ID, not a whole lot, because as Bea discussed, they spend most of their time inside the tree. So unless somebody had a really specific interest and wanted to learn more, we would be happy to geek out over insect ID. But for the purpose of this training, the insect ID is not as important as the identifying the host and identifying the signs and symptoms on the host trees.
Somebody also wants to know if there's a framework for this training and detection program that could be tailored to other pests like pine beetles, GSOB, and South American palm weevil.
Yeah, definitely. And this is not the only training like this. So we sort of borrow from other similar projects. It could be tailored to other pests for sure. We actually, the Santa Monica Mountains Resource Conservation District had, was more or less like the first one who did this. So we based it on the one that they developed, and they also included goldspotted ochre in their training. So it's definitely doable. And actually, we know that this training has been adapted to be used in other countries. So it's been used in South Africa. And we had some meetings with people from there, just, kind of brain picking, kind of sharing all the experience with them.
So we have somebody that made the comment actually supporting what you just said. It says it's worth noting that participatory science, aka citizen science, is used in many countries around the world. So that's good to acknowledge that. Susan Baird asks, how do you select the projects that you make available for the volunteers to contribute?
For this, what we did, so we created a project specific so within iNaturalist, you can create a project. So we created a project that had specific fields of, basically data that we wanted the volunteers to collect that are, anybody can use iNaturalist to report any species. Basically, I really like to use it when I'm hiking and I don't know, I see a beautiful flower and I want to know what it is, and I take a picture, submit it to iNaturalist. It's basically crowdsourcing, and there's a lot of people and they can just tell me, oh, this is blah, and some other one says, yes, I agree. It's a really cool tool. So in the case of a specific project, you can add other fields that you want, kind of data that you want people to collect. In the way we did it is that was by invitation only. So only the people that got trained are able to add in data or observations to that particular project.
I might note that in general, some scientists, for example, Ricky Laura, who's our speaker tomorrow, he's with California Department of Food and Agriculture. He actually monitors certain things in iNaturalist to see if certain pests that he's looking out for are coming up through that program. So it's a very powerful app that can really bring information in from a lot of places. We've got some questions about what the future training is going to be. Hannah, I think you already covered some of that. And again, there's a website that is listed in the chat that talks about the future programming that's going to be made available.
Right, and then there was a question if there was any more training for Orange County, and at the moment, no, but any Orange County folks are welcome to make the trek over to some of our other in-person trainings, and then if you have specific questions and want some more support and feedback about the volunteer program, you are more than welcome to reach out to me, and maybe I could set up an office hours type of thing for everyone that's been trained at any moment. So keep that in mind, Kelly. Thank you for the question.
Fantastic. So we're coming up on the hour. I did put a link to a post presentation survey. If the attendees would please go and fill that out, that would be extremely helpful to us, and that's in the chat. I think Bea and Hannah are going to stay on here. We have a lot of questions related to management of the pests. And so for those of you who have to leave, thank you for joining us. We are recording this session. We will be posting the recording on the website for the Invasive Species Lunchtime Talks. Once we've edited the captioning for it, that's often a time-consuming and sometimes difficult task. Although these two speakers are so clear and good, I don't think it'll be too much of a challenge. But it'll probably be a week or so before we can get that uploaded. So thank you all for joining. And please, if you do have time to stay on, you're welcome to hear the answers for the other questions. So if we can go ahead and ask some of these questions and provide answers related to management. So one question is there effective treatment for an infested tree other than removal of that tree?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the answer is yes. As always, what we advocate for is in doing an integrated pest management approach. So there's options that you can do with an infested tree. The removal of the infested branch, if the infestation is located in a branch, that's preferable, so you don't have to use any kind of pesticides on the tree. There's other things that you can do just to prevent infestation and to reduce the infestation in the area. But if the tree is sort of moderately or going into heavily infested and you want to do some kind of treatments, there's insecticides and fungicides that can be used to tackle both ends, like the Shothole and the Fusarium fungus that causes the disease.
There's a related question here about, is there any effective preventative measures to protect a tree from ISHB? And so I don't know if they're referring to, for example, a preventative spray, which you can comment on that, or if there's other things more mechanical that can be applied.
Right. So just to clarify, so preventative treatments or sprays are not recommended. So any kind of chemical treatment is only recommended in the case of an infested tree. And it really, as I said, depends on the level of infestation and, you know, the situation, the location of the tree, the health of the tree. There's different approaches to what to do with that tree. But no preventative treatments. But yes, there are preventative measures. Because the main thing you want to do is prevent the infestation from happening. So things you can do to prevent the movement of like bringing the beetles to that location is, for example, avoiding the movement of infested firewood and any kind of wood that hasn't been either seasoned or, you know, kiln dried or something like that. So, and that is something that works not just for Shothole, it works for basically many different kind of tree pests that move on firewood. Like a lot of the pests move on firewood, and a lot of the main problems that we have with tree pests have to do with the movement of infested firewood. So as a general rule of thumb, it's a bad idea to move firewood from one location to another. So options are just buy your firewood locally. If you're gonna go camping, buy the firewood at the campsite. I know you might think like, they're not letting me bring my firewood. They want me to buy it. They want to make a buck. Truly, they want to protect their forest. So if you're bringing things from another location, you might be bringing some pests. So, just be conscious. Either if it's allowed to be collected in there, you can collect it in there, or buy it just from that location. And if you have leftover wood, don't bring it back home. Leave it in the campsite, give it to your neighbor camper that will really appreciate it, but don't bring it back home. Just try to keep firewood where it is. Other things you can do specifically for shothole border is when you bring mulch, those are very small chips. Make sure you either buy commercial or where it comes from, because it could be moved on mulch. So if mulch comes from it's a tree that was heavily infested, it got chipped, and you're using those chips, you could be bringing shothole board to your location. Usually any mulch that has been composted or is a commercial mulch is fine to be used. But if your friend has a dead tree and they chip that tree, it's a bad idea to move those chips. They also should stay on site. And then of course, just keep your trees healthy. The more you can do to keep your trees healthy, the more resilience they will be to any kind of infestation. So water, not overwatering, no underwatering, use mulch, buy mulch, protect your trees, like use mulch around the base of your trees. Make sure you don't prune when they don't have to be pruned, and just keep them in good shape so the tree can defend themselves against this and any other pests. And we know that if a tree is healthy and the infestation is not really hard, they many times can overcome it. You just don't have to let the infestation go out of hand.
Use mulch around a tree, but no mulch volcanoes. So don't pile mulch.
What a mulch volcano
is. Don't pile mulch immediately onto what we call the root collar, or where the tree specifically goes into the ground. Like, you want to keep that mulched area low, but around it, you want to apply a good layer of mulch, or kind of like around the drip line. So that's good practice.
Good tip, Hannah.
So Lawrence Abbott is asking about natural biological controls for the borer in its native range. And he's wondering also, do the beetles cause extensive damage within its native range and with those biological controls intact?
So they don't cause huge damage in their native range, except sometimes within plantations. So whenever you have a monoculture or of a preferred host, even within the native range, sometimes they can do some damage, like more intense damage in there. And yes, one of the reasons that we think probably they're not such a huge problem in their native range is because they have natural enemies over there. There's been several trips, expeditions to go find those natural enemies. There was 3 parasitoid wasps that were found attack the beetles in their native range. 2 of them, researchers were able to bring them back to the US, and they're testing them. It's just really hard to both breed the beetles in the lab, which were finally, after many years, sort of managed to do that. And then you need that in order to breed the parasitoids. And, they're finicky. And the little populations that we were able to bring back collapsed, like crashed. And so we have to go get more. And so it's a process. It's a working process. There's new trip planned for this year to go get more samples and see if we find other species, or we can get more individuals from those target species that we want to test and bring them back here and keep doing tests. It's not as easy as, oh, I found this that attacks this beetle and we're going to release it in here. You have to first learn how to grow them, and also then you have to go through many rigorous tests, because you also want to make sure they don't attack any native beetles and they don't make the problem worse. So it's under research. But the one other kind of biocontrol that is being studied is the use of endophytes, which are microorganisms that live within the tree. So they're fungi and bacteria that live, they're symbiotic inside the tree, just much like our gut bacteria. And some of those species of endosymbionts can provide some sort of protection against Fusarium. So researchers have tested that, and now they found some really good candidates and are figuring out how to get those good bacteria into the trees. Basically, it's kind of probiotics, so they have to figure out how to get the tree to eat the yogurt. And so they have to go through that process, and that's also something that's being researched right now. So there's hope.
I would note also that the upcoming trip that Dr. Novoe-Berman talked about, as well as the research on endophytes and all these things that are taking place with respect to Shothole borer, would not be possible without the funding that was provided through the Invasive Species Council of California and the California Invasive Species Advisory Committee. So, we're very indebted to those organizations for supporting this issue and issues with other invasive species in California. We have some questions related to firewood, such as, do we have a law that prevents moving firewood? Do we need one? And somebody also is asking, is tarping to enclose firewood still a good practice to isolate, and does that isolate and kill borers?
So let me go into the tarping first. It's usually what is used is solarization. So you do put a clear tarp on top, and you basically use the heat of the sun to cook it if you want. What it is still useful, you really need to make sure that nothing can escape that tarp. So you have to tarp under and tarp over, and then have that tarp really well sealed, because you're containing the pests inside, and you're just, letting them die because of the sun, and sometimes even just time. If you leave them like that for a year or two, they're gonna die of starvation. But you really have to make sure it's super, super sealed. In the case of Shothole borer, actually, they won't die of starvation. They will just survive in downwood for many, many months, because they eat the fungus that is eating the wood, so they still have food in there. And some other pests, you will die from starvation, but you just have, so then it's like the heat from the sun what kills them. You really, really have to make sure the tarp is very, very well sealed. So it is possible. And if you're putting logs in there, do like 2 logs high, that's it. So you make sure that the heat penetrates all the way through, and use a clear tarp, because that actually creates higher temperatures than a dark tarp. Regarding the movement of firewood, there's no law right now that limits the movement of firewood. There is inspections of the border of the state. So if you're entering the state of California, your firewood might be taken or at least inspected. But there's no other regulation about movement of firewood or what to do. Actually, the only thing that is illegal is to move firewood for selling if you don't have a selling permit. But if you buy the firewood for yourself and you move it around, there's nothing that limits that. It will be good. The problem also will be enforcement of that law, right? Make sure that we can do that.
It's not necessarily a law, but there are, like, Orange County Parks Department, for example, they do not allow outside firewood to be brought into their campgrounds. So with enough will, different agencies could potentially stop firewood from coming in, but it always goes down to enforcement and whether or not that's feasible for the location to do.
Yeah, enforcement and regulation regarding firewood would be not only resource intensive from the standpoint of personnel, but also the dollars involved in being able to fund programs like that, or even the dollars that would be required to enact laws in the state and establish some kind of an oversight for that. Certainly something that would be desirable, but there's a definite cost associated with that.
Randall, there is a question about posting the recordings for this week's for the each of this week's presentation. Does for people that could not attend every day, how can they access if they're not registered for one of the events?
All of these are being recorded and all of them will be on the website for the Invasive Species Lunchtime Talks. It takes a while to edit the captioning, but as soon as we get that done, we'll post it, but it'll probably be at least a week and maybe a little longer than that. Any final comments, Julie?
I think today's been very informative, and this was as a reminder for all of you. There are lots of questions about basics of shothole borer, and the intention for today was to talk about how participatory science helps inform science in itself. And for those of you who are still curious and about invasive shothole borers and maybe have more questions or didn't get your questions answered, please go to ISHB.org, and there are numerous pull-down menus that discuss management, detection, treatment, research, and we keep that updated ongoingly. And that's your go-to source for all information regarding shothole borers.
And Hannah will be autographing pictures later of her puppy attacking her on the screen.
Yeah, Bean loves to make her presence known when she comes into a room.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. And thank you to our two speakers. Awesome job. I think even those of us who are working regularly in this have learned new things today.
Maybe see some of you tomorrow. And the next day and the next day.
Yeah, each day at noon. And you can go to that.
And thank you, Randall and Julie, for hosting.
Surely. Go to the website if you haven't registered already.